Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over a decade, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on that Tuesday afternoon in March 2024. The studio lights were bright, the audience was energetic, and two families stood ready to compete in what everyone assumed would be another entertaining but typical episode. The Patel family from New Jersey faced off against the Chandri family from California, both bringing their own unique energy to the stage. But one contestant, 26-year-old Priya Chandri, was about to make television history in a way that would leave Steve Harvey speechless, the audience in tears, and viewers around the world inspired by what true determination looked like. Priya stood at the Fast Money podium, wearing a stunning burgundy sari with golden embroidery that caught the studio lights beautifully. Her traditional Indian jewelry sparkled as she moved, the delicate Mang Tika adorning her forehead, catching everyone's attention. She had insisted on wearing her grandmother's wedding jewelry for this appearance, despite her family suggesting she might want something more casual for American television. But Priya had her reasons that would soon become clear to everyone watching. The Chandri family had already won the main game, and now it was time for Fast Money. Priya's cousin had gone first, scoring a respectable 142 points. That meant Priya needed just 58 points to win the $20,000 prize. For most contestants, this would be a moment of nervous excitement. For Priya, it was something much more significant. Steve approached her with his characteristic swagger, ready to deliver his usual pre-game banter. But something about Priya's demeanor made him pause. She wasn't exhibiting the typical nervous energy of a Fast Money contestant. Instead, she had a quiet intensity, a focused determination that seemed to fill the space around her. "Priya, you ready for this?" Steve asked, his voice warm and encouraging. Priya nodded, adjusting her dupatta slightly before placing her hands on the podium. "I've been ready for this my whole life, Mr. Harvey," she said, her voice clear despite the slight tremor in her hands. Steve raised an eyebrow at the response but continued with the game setup. "All right, Priya, you know how this works. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You've got 20 seconds. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. Your cousin got us 142 points, so you need 58 to win that $20,000. Priya took a deep breath, and in that moment, she thought about everything that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, her father had suffered a massive heart attack. The medical bills had devastated their family's savings, and her parents' small restaurant in San Diego was struggling to stay afloat. Her mother had been working 18-hour days, trying to keep the business running, while also caring for her recovering husband. Priya had taken a leave from her engineering job to help, but they were drowning in debt. The Family Feud appearance had been a last-minute decision when another family had to cancel, and the producers had reached out to them as potential replacements. Priya had seen it as a sign, maybe even divine intervention. 20 seconds on the clock, please, Steve announced, snapping Priya back to the present. The familiar timer appeared on the screen. "Here we go, Priya. Name a fruit you might find in a pie." Without hesitation, Priya responded, "Apple." Steve continued rapidly through the questions. "Name something people do when they're nervous." "Bite their nails." Priya answered instantly. "How many hours of sleep should you get each night?" 8. Name a place where you have to wait in line. DMV. Name something that makes you feel better when you're sick. Mother's soup. Priya said, and for just a moment, her voice caught slightly on the word mother. The buzzer sounded, and Steve gave her an encouraging nod. "Good job, good job. Let's see how you did." As they moved to reveal the answers, something extraordinary began to happen. "You said apple for a fruit in a pie," Steve announced, survey said. The board revealed the number 1 answer with 47 points. Apple was the top response. The audience erupted in applause, but Priya remained focused, her hands pressed together in front of her chest in a subtle prayer position. "You said bite their nails for something people do when they're nervous," Steve continued. The board showed it as the number 1 answer again, with 31 points. Steve's eyebrows raised slightly. 2 number 1 answers in a row was impressive but not unheard of. 8 hours of sleep, Steve read. Survey said. Number one answer, 29 points. Now Steve was genuinely surprised. The audience was getting louder with each reveal. 3 number one answers in a row was exceptional. DMV for a place where you have to wait in line, Steve announced. And even before the board revealed it, there was an electric anticipation in the air. Number one answer, 43 points. The studio erupted. 4 consecutive number one answers in Fast Money was almost unprecedented. Steve looked at Priya with genuine amazement. "Young lady, do you understand what's happening here?" But Priya wasn't celebrating yet. She stood perfectly still, her eyes closed, her lips moving in what appeared to be a silent prayer. "We have one more answer," Steve said, his voice reflecting the gravity of the moment. "You said mother's soup for something that makes you feel better when you're sick. If this is the number one answer, Priya, you will have done something that has never been done in the history of Family Feud. You will have gotten all 5 number one answers in Fast Money." The perfect score. The studio fell silent. Even the production crew had stopped what they were doing to watch. This was television history, potentially being made, survey said. Steve paused dramatically. The board revealed the answer. Number 1, 38 points. The studio exploded into chaos. The audience leaped to their feet in a standing ovation. Steve Harvey, the man who had seen everything in his years of hosting, stood with his mouth open, in complete shock. Priya had achieved the impossible, a perfect Fast Money round with all 5 number one answers, scoring 188 points and bringing the family's total to 330 points, the highest Fast Money score ever recorded. But Priya wasn't celebrating. Instead, she had collapsed to her knees right there at the podium, her hands covering her face as she sobbed. Steve immediately rushed to her side, concerned that something was wrong. "Priya, honey, are you okay? You just made history. This has never happened before." Through her tears, Priya looked up at Steve, and what she said next would change everything. "Mr. Harvey, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you why I'm really here." Steve helped her to her feet, keeping a supportive hand on her shoulder. The audience had quieted, sensing that something profound was happening. "Talk to me," Steve said gently. Priya wiped her tears, smearing her carefully applied makeup, but she didn't care. 6 months ago, my father had a heart attack. He needed emergency surgery, and even with insurance, the bills were over $200,000. My parents own a small restaurant, and we've been struggling to keep it open while paying for his care. Steve's expression softened as he listened. Priya continued, her voice growing stronger. "But that's not the whole story. My father came to this country from India 30 years ago with nothing but $50 and a dream. He worked 3 jobs to put himself through school, then opened his restaurant to serve authentic Indian food to our community. He taught me that in America, anything is possible if you work hard enough." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. When he had his heart attack, the doctors said he had less than a 20% chance of survival. But my father is a fighter. He survived, but the medical bills were destroying everything he had worked for. We were going to lose the restaurant, our home, everything. Priya paused, looking directly at Steve. 3 weeks ago, we got a notice that we had 30 days to pay or the restaurant would be foreclosed. My mother hasn't slept in weeks. She just sits by my father's bedside, crying when she thinks no one is watching. Steve's eyes were glistening with unshed tears. Priya continued, "When Family Feud called and asked if we could fill in for a family that had to cancel, my mother said it was a sign from God. She made me promise to wear her mother's jewelry, my grandmother's wedding jewelry, for good luck. My grandmother passed away last year, but before she died, she told me that these pieces would bring our family protection and prosperity when we needed it most." Priya touched the mangtika on her forehead gently. "Mr. Harvey, I studied every episode of Family Feud for the past 2 weeks. I memorized the most common answers to hundreds of questions. I practiced with my family every night after visiting my father in the hospital. I knew that if I could get to Fast Money, If I could just get those 5 questions right, maybe I could save my family's dream. Steve was visibly moved, but Priya wasn't finished. You asked me if I understood what just happened. Yes, I understand. I just won more than enough money to save our restaurant. But more than that, I proved what my father always told me, that in America, when you combine hard work with faith, miracles can happen. The tears were flowing freely now, both from Priya and from many in the audience. Steve pulled her into a genuine, heartfelt hug. "Priya," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "your father was right. But let me tell you something else. It wasn't just hard work and faith that got you here. It was love. Love for your family, love for your father's dream, and love for the culture and traditions you're fighting to preserve." Steve turned to address the audience and the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed something that goes beyond a game show record. We've witnessed what the American dream really looks like. It looks like a young woman in her grandmother's jewelry, standing up for her family and achieving the impossible through preparation, determination, and faith." But Steve wasn't done. He had been moved by many contestants over the years, but something about Priya's story, her quiet dignity, her refusal to give up on her family's dream, touched him deeply. "Priya, tell me about your father's restaurant. What's it called?" Priya smiled through her tears. "It's called Ghar Ka Khana. It means home food in Hindi. My father wanted immigrants from India to have a place where they could taste the foods that reminded them of home." Steve nodded thoughtfully. "And where is this restaurant?" "It's in San Diego, in the Mira Mesa neighborhood. We've been there for 15 years. It's not fancy, but my mother makes everything from scratch, just like she learned from her mother in Mumbai." Steve made a decision in that moment that would have far-reaching consequences. "Priya, I want you to know something. Your $20,000 is yours. You earned it. But I'm going to make you a promise right here, right now, on national television. I'm going to visit your father's restaurant, and I'm going to bring some friends." The audience applauded, but Steve raised his hand for quiet. "I'm not done. When this episode airs, I want everyone watching to know about Ghar Ka Khana. I want them to know that this restaurant represents everything that makes America special. It represents dreams, family, tradition, and the courage to keep fighting even when everything seems lost." Priya was sobbing again, but now they were tears of joy and relief. Her family members had joined her on stage, all of them embracing in a group hug that seemed to embody the very essence of family itself. What happened next was unprecedented in Family Feud history. Steve turned to the production team and made an announcement. "We're going to do something we've never done before. We're going to stay in touch with the Chandri family, and in 6 months, we're going to do a follow-up segment to see how they're doing." The producers looked shocked, but nodded their agreement. Steve's word on his show was final. As the taping concluded and the families prepared to leave, Priya had one more surprise. She removed one of her grandmother's bangles from her wrist and approached Steve. "Mr. Harvey, in our culture, when someone does something life-changing for your family, you give them something precious to remember the moment. This was my grandmother's. She would want you to have it." Steve was clearly moved. "Priya, I can't take your grandmother's bangle." But Priya insisted. "Please, Mr. Harvey, you didn't just give us money today. You gave us hope. You gave us dignity. You made us feel seen and valued. That's worth more than any jewelry." Steve accepted the bangle with tears in his eyes. Later, he would have it framed and placed in his office, where it would serve as a reminder of one of the most powerful moments in his television career. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The clip of Priya's perfect fast money round went viral within hours, but it was her story that truly captured people's hearts. Within 24 hours, Ghar Ka Khana had received over 10,000 online reviews, all 5 stars, from people who wanted to support the family. The restaurant's social media pages gained hundreds of thousands of followers overnight. But the most incredible part was what happened to the restaurant itself. People began traveling from all over Southern California to eat at Gar Kakana. The local news picked up the story, and soon national outlets were covering it. Food bloggers and critics who had never noticed the small family restaurant were suddenly writing glowing reviews. The mayor of San Diego even declared a day in honor of the Chandri family and their contribution to the community. Steve Harvey kept his promise. 2 weeks after the episode aired, he arrived at Gar Kakana with a film crew and several celebrity friends. The visit was documented for his talk show, and the segment became one of the highest-rated episodes of the season. But more importantly for the Chandri family, Steve's visit brought even more attention to their restaurant. He tried every dish on the menu, praising Priya's mother's cooking and talking about the importance of supporting small, family-owned businesses. During the visit, Steve met Priya's father for the first time. Despite still recovering from his surgery, Mr. Chandri had insisted on being at the restaurant that day. The moment between the two men was powerful. Through tears, Mr. Chandri thanked Steve not just for the money, but for validating his life's work. "I came to this country with nothing," he said, his voice weak but filled with emotion. "I worked hard. I built something, but I was afraid I would lose it all and my sacrifice would mean nothing. You and my daughter, you saved not just my restaurant, but my legacy." Steve's response became another viral moment. "Sir, with all respect, I didn't save anything. Your daughter did that. You raised a young woman who loved you and your dreams so much that she made the impossible possible. That's your legacy, not this restaurant, as wonderful as it is. Your legacy is in the values you instilled in your children." The transformation of Gar Kakana was remarkable. Within 3 months, they had paid off all their medical debts, and the restaurant was thriving like never before. They hired additional staff to handle the increased demand, providing jobs for others in their community. Priya's mother started offering cooking classes, teaching traditional Indian recipes to eager students. The restaurant became a gathering place not just for the Indian community, but for people of all backgrounds who wanted to experience authentic cuisine and support a family that had captured their hearts. 6 months after the original airing, as promised, Family Feud did a follow-up segment. When Steve Harvey walked onto the stage and announced they had a special update, the audience was eager to hear what had happened to the Chandri family. The segment began with footage from Priya's historic Fast Money round, reminding viewers of that incredible moment. Then, the screen showed the current state of Gar Kakana. The small, struggling restaurant had been transformed. While they had kept its authentic, homey atmosphere, they had been able to make necessary repairs and improvements. The dining room was full of happy customers, the kitchen was bustling with activity, and the walls were covered with photos from the community, including a framed picture of Priya's moment on Family Feud. Priya appeared on screen, looking radiant and confident. She gave an update that brought tears to Steve's eyes once again. Not only had they saved the restaurant, but they had been able to expand. They had opened a second location and were planning a third. They had also started a foundation to help other immigrant families facing medical crises, named after Priya's grandmother. The foundation had already helped 5 families in similar situations. But the most beautiful moment came when Priya revealed that her father had made a full recovery. The camera showed Mr. Chandri back in the kitchen of his restaurant, cooking alongside his wife, his face beaming with pride and health. He spoke directly to the camera, his message meant for Steve Harvey and everyone who had supported them. In India, we have a saying, Atithi Devo Bhava, which means, the guest is God. Every person who came to our restaurant, who supported us, who prayed for us, you were all God's blessings to our family. We don't just serve food anymore. We serve love, gratitude, and hope. The segment included testimonials from customers who had become regulars at the restaurant. There was the elderly veteran who said the Chandri family had become like his own family. The young couple who had gotten engaged at the restaurant because it was where they had their first date after seeing the Family Feud episode. The local teacher who brought her class to learn about Indian culture and cuisine. Each story illustrated how one moment of triumph on a game show had rippled outward, creating waves of positive change in the community. Steve Harvey, watching the segment live with his studio audience, was visibly emotional. When it ended, he stood up and addressed the cameras directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we do what we do. It's not about the games or the prizes. It's about families, dreams, and the power of never giving up." Priya Chandri didn't just set a Family Feud record that may never be broken. She showed us all what's possible when you combine preparation with purpose, determination with love. He continued, "I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I can count on one hand the moments that have truly changed me. Watching Priya achieve that perfect score, hearing her story, and seeing what's happened since, that's one of those moments. It reminds me that television at its best isn't just entertainment. It's a platform for real human stories that can inspire and change lives." The impact of Priya's appearance on Family Feud extended far beyond her family and their restaurant. Her story inspired a national conversation about immigrant families, the American dream, and the importance of supporting small businesses. Universities invited her to speak about perseverance and family values. Business schools used her preparation strategy as a case study in goal achievement. Cultural organizations honored her for promoting Indian culture and traditions in mainstream media. Priya herself became an unexpected spokesperson for family values and cultural pride. She continued to wear traditional Indian dress for her public appearances, always including pieces of her grandmother's jewelry. When asked why, she would explain that her success came not from abandoning her culture, but from embracing it fully. "My grandmother's jewelry brought me luck," she would say. "But more than that, it reminded me of who I am and where I come from. That gave me strength." The Family Feud producers noticed something interesting in the months following Priya's episode. Application numbers from immigrant families increased by over 300%. Families who had never thought of themselves as typical game show contestants were now eager to share their stories and compete. The show began featuring more diverse families, and the ratings reflected America's appetite for these authentic, multicultural stories. 1 year after her appearance, Priya was invited back to Family Feud for a special Champions episode. This time, she wasn't competing. Instead, she was there to present a special award that the show had created in her honor. The Chandri Family Achievement Award would be given annually to a family that demonstrated exceptional dedication to preserving their cultural heritage while pursuing the American dream. The first recipients were a Korean family who had overcome bankruptcy to save their family's traditional pottery business. During that appearance, Steve Harvey revealed something that the audience didn't know. The bangle that Priya had given him had inspired him to learn more about Indian culture. He had visited India, met with families similar to the Chandris, and had gained a deeper appreciation for the immigrant experience. He announced that his foundation would be partnering with the Chandri Foundation to provide emergency medical assistance to immigrant families facing health crises. Priya's response was characteristic of the grace and humility that had endeared her to millions. "Mr. Harvey, when I stood at that podium, I was just a daughter trying to save her father's dream. I never imagined that moment would lead to all of this. You gave me a chance to show what my family was capable of. Now, together, we can give other families that same chance." The story took another beautiful turn when Priya revealed that she had left her engineering job to work full-time on expanding the family restaurant business and running their foundation. She had also started documenting her mother's recipes, planning to publish a cookbook with all proceeds going to their foundation. The cookbook would be titled Mother's Soup, Recipes and Stories of Healing, a reference to her fifth fast money answer that had completed her perfect round. 3 years later, Garka Khana had become a small chain of restaurants, each one maintaining the family atmosphere and authentic recipes that had made the original special. But more importantly, the Chandri Foundation had helped over 100 families navigate medical crises without losing their businesses or homes. Priya often said that the $20,000 from Family Feud had saved their restaurant, but the exposure and support from the public had given them a purpose beyond anything they had imagined. The relationship between the Chandri family and Steve Harvey continued long after the camera stopped rolling. He became a regular visitor whenever he was in California, always stopping by for what he called the best Indian food in America and the warmest family atmosphere anywhere. He would often bring other celebrities, turning Garka Khana into an unexpected celebrity hotspot while never losing its neighborhood charm. During one visit, Steve asked Priya what she thought her grandmother would say about everything that had happened. Priya smiled, touching the Mang Tika she still wore for special occasions. She would say that the jewelry did its job. It protected our family and brought us prosperity. But she would also say that the real treasure was not the money or the fame, but the way our community came together to support us. That's the true blessing. The Perfect Score Club, an informal group of Family Feud contestants who had achieved exceptional fast money rounds, invited Priya to be their honorary president. She declined the title but agreed to mentor other contestants, especially those from immigrant families who felt intimidated by the prospect of being on national television. Her advice was always the same: be yourself, honor your family, and remember that your story is just as American as anyone else's. Media scholars began studying what they called the Priya effect, the phenomenon of how one authentic moment on television had created such widespread impact. They noted that in an era of manufactured reality TV drama, Priya's genuine emotion and real stakes had resonated with viewers in a way that scripted entertainment couldn't match. Her perfect score was impressive, but it was her humanity that had made her unforgettable. The Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History reached out to Priya about including her story in their exhibition on the American Dream. They requested several items, including the sari she wore on the show, a menu from the original struggling restaurant, and a photo of her grandmother wearing the jewelry that Priya had worn on Family Feud. Priya agreed, saying it was an honor to have her family's story preserved as part of American history. 5 years after that historic day, Garka Khana hosted a special anniversary celebration. The original Fast Money episode played on screens throughout the restaurant as customers enjoyed special dishes created for the occasion. Steve Harvey surprised everyone by showing up unannounced, and his impromptu speech became yet another viral moment. 5 years ago, I asked Priya 5 questions. Her answers were perfect. But the real perfect answer was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. This family took a moment of victory and turned it into a movement of compassion. He continued, "Every time I see that bangle in my office, I'm reminded that success isn't just about winning. It's about what you do with your victory." The Chandris could have taken their money and disappeared into private life. Instead, they used their platform to lift others. That's the real perfect score. Priya's father, now fully recovered and back to working full-time in the restaurant, stood up to respond. His words, delivered in accented but clear English, captured the essence of their journey. "Mr. Harvey, in our culture, we believe in karma, that good deeds come back to you. You showed kindness to my daughter when she was vulnerable. That kindness came back multiplied by thousands of people who supported us. We are not special. We are just proof that goodness exists everywhere, waiting for a chance to show itself." The celebration that night turned into an impromptu festival, with customers sharing their own stories of family struggles and triumphs. The restaurant stayed open until dawn, serving free food to anyone who wanted to be part of the community that had formed around this remarkable family. Local news covered it as a testament to the power of community support and the importance of small businesses in bringing people together. As the years passed, Priya's story became part of Family Feud lore, the gold standard for fast money rounds. New contestants would often say they wanted to pull a Priya, meaning they wanted to achieve perfection under pressure. But Steve Harvey would always correct them. Pulling a Priya, he would say, isn't about getting all the #1 answers. It's about playing for something bigger than yourself and being willing to share your truth with the world. The impact on the Chandri family was transformative, but they never forgot their roots or the struggle that had brought them to that moment. Every year on the anniversary of Priya's appearance, they would host a free dinner at all their restaurants for families dealing with medical crises. They called it Perfect Score Day, and it became a tradition that other restaurants in their communities began to adopt. The simple act of providing a free meal to struggling families rippled outward, creating a network of support that touched thousands of lives. Priya eventually married and had children of her own, and she made sure they understood the significance of their family story. She would tell them about their grandfather who came to America with $50 and a dream, their grandmother whose jewelry brought protection to the family, and the day when 5 perfect answers on a game show changed everything. But most importantly, she taught them that success meant nothing if it wasn't used to help others. The cookbook Priya published became a bestseller, not just for its recipes, but for the stories that accompanied each dish. Every recipe included a memory, a lesson, or a piece of wisdom from her parents or grandmother. The chapter on her mother's soup, the answer that had completed her perfect round, was particularly moving. It described how her mother would make special soups for different ailments, believing that food could heal not just the body but the soul. The recipe itself was simple, but the love and intention behind it were what made it powerful. Television historians would later mark Priya's appearance as a watershed moment in game show history. It proved that authentic human emotion and real stakes could create more compelling television than any manufactured drama. It also demonstrated the unique power of game shows to change lives, not just through prizes, but through the platform they provided for ordinary people to share extraordinary stories. Steve Harvey himself was profoundly affected by the experience. In his autobiography, he devoted an entire chapter to Priya and the lessons she had taught him about the responsibility that comes with having a platform. He wrote about how her grandmother's bangle reminded him daily that television could be a force for good, that every contestant had a story worth hearing, and that sometimes the smallest gesture of kindness could create waves of positive change. The relationship between traditional media and immigrant communities was also impacted by Priya's story. Networks began to realize that America's increasing diversity wasn't just a demographic reality, but an opportunity for compelling storytelling. More shows began featuring immigrant families, and cultural authenticity became valued rather than minimized. Priya had shown that you didn't need to hide your culture to succeed on American television. In fact, embracing it fully could be your greatest strength. 10 years after that perfect fast money round, a documentary was made about the Chandri family and the impact of that single moment. It featured interviews with hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by the family's story, from customers who had become lifelong friends to families who had been helped by the foundation. The documentary premiered at major film festivals and won several awards. But for Priya, the most meaningful moment was when it was shown in her parents' home village in India, where relatives who had watched her appearance on YouTube finally got to see the full scope of what had resulted from it. In the documentary, Priya reflected on that moment at the podium when Steve had asked her the 5 questions. She revealed something she had never shared before. Just before the round began, she had whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her, asking not for success but for the strength to represent her family with dignity. "I think that's why I was so calm," she said. "I wasn't playing to win money. I was playing to honor everyone who had sacrificed for me to be standing there." The documentary also revealed the behind-the-scenes impact of Priya's appearance. Family Feud producer